Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dutiful Future. Today we're going to be discussing how the Conservative and Unionist Party of the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland is now more transphobic than it is unionist. So whilst that intro is a bit of a joke, it's pretty true. You can see on the screen already right now some pretty tragic news. The UK government is going to be blocking the Scottish Gender Bill. So first of all, let's just establish the very basics here. The Scottish Gender Bill was basically changing how one can be recognised in the changing of their gender. I have the information right here as well. Also, this is going to be a little bit scuffed. This is my immediate reaction. I've just seen this and decided to get my setup going because this is some massive news. The previous system of getting your gender recognised as different was based off of a bill from 2004, and the requirements were medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Applicants must live in line with their gender for a minimum of 2 years, and they must be above the age of 18. The changes to this, which were introduced by the Gender Recognition Act under the Scottish Parliament, is number one, gender dysphoria is no longer required, and applicants must live in line with their gender for 3 months, or 6 months for minors. Living in line with their gender basically means presenting outwardly as whichever gender that you identify yourself as. This bill actually had a wide range of support in the Scottish Parliament. It was supported by 5 different parties. Even Conservative MPs in Scotland actually supported this. This is the result of years of activist work in Scotland, largely pushed by, I believe, one vocal proponent is Mari Black, who's an SNP MP. And this bill got passed. It's a fantastic bit of progression for trans rights in the UK and also across Europe. However, the UK government, in all its wisdom and transphobia, has decided, no. You want to make things better? No, you can't. So even against, if you try and ignore all social aspects of this, you don't even consider the element of it involving trans people and their rights, which is obviously the most important thing here. This is a massive progression in British politics. I mean, for the Westminster government to block the acts to block acts and the actions that the devolved government of Scotland has is, I'm pretty sure, near unprecedented. I mean, it is a phenomenal breach of Scotland's, or just a phenomenal insult to Scottish sovereignty. So the basic agreement was Scotland and Wales each have devolved powers. They have their own parliaments. Scotland has quite a few more powers than Wales in a lot of different areas of legislation. But normally, they can kind of do what they want in a lot of different ways. I'm not going to bother going into all the details, but that's the gist of it. But so, as you can see here, the UK government has decided to block a controversial, I guess it is controversial if you consider people like J.K. Rowling to be worth listening to, change their legally recognised gender. Ministers are concerned the bill conflicts with GB-wide equality laws. This is the first ever use of Section 35 order, which stops a Scottish bill from becoming law. So this was always part of the agreement. This was a thing that they can do, but the first time it's ever been used, and as a time when the sort of independence debate is starting to ramp up again as the SNP continue their electoral dominance in Scotland, this is going to be a massive galvanization for the independence movement a second time round. I've seen some people argue that the introduction of this bill is a very cynical ploy by Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP as a means to try and bait Rishi Sunak and his government into blocking the law, so that Nicola Sturgeon can go to the Scottish people and say, "See, it was always a lie. We're never actually that sovereign. We need to be independent." I think that cynical argument could be true. I personally don't think so. I think there's been quite a lot of work building up to this, but even then, I don't think it really matters, because what matters is if you think the bill is good or not. I passionately think that the bill was a good thing. It will support some of the most discriminated people in our current society, trans people, and it will, even if you're not even super caring about that sort of issue, you can just say, well, it will alleviate quite a lot of stress on the NHS. As I said earlier, this was a great argument that Lonerbox made. I watched their video earlier today. That it decreases a lot of the consistent psychological and it decreases a lot of the monitoring and work that the NHS needs to do in order to let people transition. And of course, the NHS is struggling right now. It's been in a crisis for a while, so alleviating any kind of pressure is a good thing. I recommend you watch Lonerbox's video. He goes into a lot of good detail about the sort of why people are so angry about this bill and why it's not kind of dumbfounded, or why these complaints are often not founded in a lot of real facts and or logic. Hashtag Ben Shapiro. And also goes into how few people have actually properly transitioned under these current rules in the UK. So this change was a good thing, and that's all that really matters. But so aside from just the transition, this is obviously incredibly depressing for anyone who's trans. I mean, the Conservative government has for a long time claimed that it is, turning a new face and turning against its, it used to be opposed to gay marriage. A lot of Conservative MPs voted against gay marriage when that was brought into Parliament. But it seems that this is where they're drawing the line, and they're drawing the line so hard that they're willing to break away from their own name, the Conservative Unionist Party, to make sure, no. We can't have trans people doing what they want. That's not okay. So we're going to see a very, very lively response from many people in the Scottish Parliament in the next few days. Nicola Sturgeon is likely going to blow up and use this as a means to recall for independence. PMQs would be interesting to watch as well. I can't remember their name, but the new leader of the SNP in Westminster will no doubt be using that as a platform to yell at Rishi Sunak about the blocking of these bills and the infringement on Scottish sovereignty. And it really does just show that, the original deal that Scotland were given was always, not truly what it was. There's still that sort of string where, like, oh, by the way, if we think that you're giving too much progress, too many rights to people, we'll take that away. Here we go, down here. Yep. Trans campaigners welcome the bill. However, critics of the plans worried that allowing anyone to self-identify as a woman would impact on women's rights and access to single-sex spaces like refuges and changing rooms. It doesn't immediately let you change your identity to medically transition. It often comes down to the whole prison argument, people can just say that they're a woman and then they can go into prisons and do lots of crazy stuff. But the data doesn't really come out of that. I think it's something like in the last 10 years, only there's been 7 cases of trans women. I don't want to get too heavy, but let's say being bad in a very specific way in prisons. Whereas I believe this year alone or last year alone, there's been 10 cases against trans women who are forced to be in male prisons because obviously they're women in males' prisons. So let's have a look here. If ministers think a Holyrood bill will modify the laws reserved to Westminster and have adverse effects, whatever. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has argued that there are no grounds for the UK government to challenge the legislation as it falls within the powers of the Scottish Parliament. She has said any move to block the reforms would be using trans people as a political weapon, which is very much true. It's just so typical of Turf Island that the defining characteristic, what is going to be challenging the union so heavily, is that the Conservatives just couldn't help themselves but say, no rights for them. No, that's too much. That's too good for them. They don't deserve it. And it is an absolutely classic element of British politics and is very, very disappointing to see, because seeing that level of progress just be blocked is quite depressing, and I think it'll have a significant consequences for the union itself. This is a real shame. I mean, I wish I had more to say about it. I just thought that this would be a good way of bringing this sort of thing to light. I imagine in the future, I want to make a bigger video about this. I'm currently planning a video on progressive Scottish nationalism, and that will obviously include this bill and this situation here. But I think, this is just a real shame for anyone who cares about trans issues in the UK and cares about trans rights. I mean, the best thing for Scotland to do, if in the case of this bill, would probably be to go independent and then try and reinstate this. I mean, it has been controversial across the UK, I'd say. There has been some people who don't like it. I mean, obviously, we live in the UK and we have a certain media class, but it's not great. It's not a great place to be. But I would just recommend, if you're from the UK, email your MP. It doesn't matter what party there are sympathetic people across the aisle in the UK to trans issues and trans rights. So email your MP and say you're disappointed by this. It doesn't matter if they're Labour, Green, Tory, or whoever the hell else. It's definitely a good thing to do. And the most disappointing thing I think so far has been, or what will be most interesting to see, will be the Labour Party's response. Keir Starmer especially has been very soft on trans rights, and I say soft, I mean kind of not really supportive. Hasn't gone super hard against, but very much not in support, which is a real shame. Today he's been talking about his dislike of this bill, specifically the age change from 16 to 18.
Why? In relation, Amber, to your point, I'm afraid I do think that 16 is too young. Now, people will just have different views on this, but I think 16 is too young for that process.
What would the right age be, Sir Keir?
Well, I would go for 18. The age of adulthood in most cases.
And that's an argument for another video, but it's disappointing to see that the leader of what is supposed to be the Progressive Party in the UK hasn't fully come behind this issue. So, you might think that, my MP's a Labour MP, it's the Tories doing this, what's the point? No, email your own MP and say that you were disappointed in the government's actions and in the leader of their party as well, if you happen to live in a Labour seat. It is a worthwhile thing to do. That sort of pressure really piles on. As someone who works kind of tangentially in journalism, you do see that these sort of things have an impact. And if you have a personal story about this bill and how you've been affected, I also recommend you, even if it's anonymously, email that to your MP too. These sorts of stories are the kind of things that will get mentioned in Parliament and can have real force and impact on a national stage. But yeah, to summarise, I know I've been kind of rambling all over the place, but the blocking of this bill is really disappointing to see. I think a lot of us were excited by the progress here. And I think we can only hope that the Scottish Parliament can win this fight and try and reinstate the bill. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this issue plays out, both in Westminster and for the future of the United Kingdom. But thank you for watching. If you want a video to go more in-depth into this issue, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to do a lot more research into this and sort of really lay out the different sides, possibly even going into the arguments that the transphobes in the UK use and sort of breaking those down, because a lot of them are not based in fact. But this was meant to be just a quick little summary of what's happened here and how disappointing it really is. I do expect to try and put some more effort into covering this as the year goes on. I do intend on making a lot more of these sort of quick reply informal coverage videos. And thank you for watching. Please do everything you can to support this bill and support trans people. And see you around.